Hi everyone, I'm Christina Horton, the marketing manager here at the C.M. Russell Museum. Today we are out in Charlie's studio. This is actually the gallery edition portion. We just completed a 2-year restoration project about a year ago, and during that time we restored the home and the studio here. A part of that project was taking the artifacts out of the studio and preserving them and getting them into our vaults and into our highly climate controlled spaces within the museum. But we wanted to keep the ambiance of this space for our visitors. So we worked with our staff and some vendors and had reproductions made. So our curatorial staff is here today and they're going to tell us a little bit about that. If you want to take a little walk with me, we'll head on in. Okay, so Brenda is going to talk first.
So this project was really close to all of our hearts, mostly because we do know how important the studio is to Russell's legacy, but also because in caring for all the artifacts and the building itself, we got to, in being able to reinterpret the space, we got to actually be a big part of recreating a lot of the replicas. So everything you see here in the studio has been reproduced, and a lot of that, I unfortunately did not have the talent to do any of that, but we do have some very talented staff members that did a big portion of the reproductions themselves. So we had Dorothy Nunez, who created a lot, she did a lot of embellishment on the shirt you see there, the child's shirt. She created these leggings you see over here. And she did a lot of just kind of looking historically at the artifacts that Russell owned himself, but then also looking into how best to recreate these items so that they could have that feel that you know, they were authentic in a lot of ways, and they are, because they are original artifacts that people did create. And then we had Dave Lornadelli. He is our preparator, and he had created this birdhouse here, which was really neat because Charlie did build birdhouses for the studio, and he'd have them placed within the studio and then outside, of course, for the birds. And so he also did some work with some of the other items in here. And so we think it's fun for visitors to know that, because when they're in here, they can see how really personal this whole project was to us. And then Jeff Stocking, who's our senior preparator, he also created a lot of the items in here, and he's going to talk about one of the things that he spent a lot of time on himself, and that you can see when you're here.
Hello. So this, out of many of the other objects that I was able to help create, this was one of the larger pieces that I worked on, and this is a replica of the painting Signal Glass. And the way that I went about building this is first taking the actual image of the piece and putting it into Photoshop, and through Photoshop wiping away or deleting some of the figures. And the idea in creating something like this was that Charlie was still working on the painting, and so we wanted to make it look like it was in process. And so I was able to wipe away some of these figures in Photoshop. Then I, on our large-scale printer, printed out the in-process piece, and then came back in after we stretched it on a stretcher bar, came back in and hand-painted in some of the shadows and some of the underpainting to make it look like Charlie just put down a brush and walked out to the bar. So.
Awesome, thanks, Jeff.
Sure.
Our senior curator, Emily Wilson, is also going to talk a little bit about some of the smaller artifacts that we have here in the studio, and probably some other things.
Yeah. Well, welcome to our glorious shelves. Russell really used these shelves here to, hold a lot of his supplies. For example, these 2 boxes here were actually Russell's, and they do contain these scraps of birch bark you see here, and all this little fabric that he used to create these little sculptures that he would use to give as gifts. For example, here is an example of his little Christmas gentleman made of a beech nut. This and several other artifact replicas that you see here were created by an artist out of Minneapolis named Nick Golfis. And he tells a story, which we'll have a link to in some of the videos, about the beechnut head here that he had to go on various forays to try and find in Minneapolis, and was so excited. And so he carved that by hand, heated it up in his oven, and then again he works for a theater company, and he used to, and so he would get advice from different people who made props for wigs and sewed clothes to kind of see the best fabric that would work to create these things, along with using images that we provided of Russell's own artwork. So you can just see the detail here that he created of the little lace, and using little pins to work as buttons here, and just how he twisted metal to create the cane, just like Russell did. And it's just these little intricate details that Nick really plays up, and of course that Russell was unique for doing, which makes his artwork so special to have received it. Another great work he made is right here, this horse. And so Russell was known, of course, for doing his Western Cayuse type of horses, and they're not like Eastern horses, and they're not like a regular, let's say, model that you get from at a craft store of a horse. Nick Golfis, he compared it to sort of creating like a rusty truck, the artistry that would grow into creating the rust. And so in the same way as with a horse, it's the artistry that goes into creating the certain muscular structure that you get from a horse that's out on the range, you know, not super well fed, but is working a workhorse and sort of has a rangy appetite for all the grasses out here. But again, these are just like really great pieces that we have. You can see this work here that Jeff, our preparator, was another one to create. And you can see how, in some ways, we've tried to do our best to take historic photographs and kind of make the placement of the objects the same. So, Christina, you just want to show that picture right there. You can see that same sculpture to the side.
Nope, this one.
Yeah, this one up here. So there's image there and a birch bark canoe, which I'll talk about. But you can kind of see how we tried to do the palette in the back. And this image here is actually from 1908 of Buffalo Coat. He was a Chippewa Cree Indian, Native American. And here is his brother, who was a model. They were both models for Russell. This is John Youngboy, and so you can kind of obviously see the family resemblance there. And another artist that we had, a local artist who did woodworking, Bruce Morgan, made some of the really great gnomes that are up there, and then these birch bark canoes. If you want to just kind of get a close-up on that, you can just, again, see the artistry that our local artist really used. You know, he went out and foraged in the woods to get these birch bark strips, and then, you know, lashed them all by hand and painted them just as Russell did. And so it's just really these details that go into the work that we're so thankful for. So thanks for joining us here.
We'll be recording a 3D tour of the studio next week. And posting that, so you'll be able to come in and tour the space. We'll be linking to that video with Nick Golfis that Emily mentioned. And thank you for joining us today. Stay safe, and we'll see you all later. Goodbye.
Thank you.